The helicopter's rotors beat against Arctic wind as we descended toward what looked like a concrete bunker rising from endless white. My breath fogged the window while I studied the facility below. Too many guard towers for a research station. Too much razor wire for anything routine. "Welcome to Station Polaris," Colonel Barker said as the skids touched down. His voice carried that particular authority I'd learned to recognize in Afghanistan, the kind that meant classified and dangerous. The cold hit like a physical blow when I stepped onto the landing pad. -40, maybe worse. My lungs burned with each breath, and ice crystals formed on my eyelashes before I could blink them away. Barker's handshake was firm through insulated gloves, his weathered face showing no reaction to the temperature. "Hell of a place for a research facility," I said, shouldering my duffel bag. "Isolation has its advantages." He gestured toward the main building. "Especially for our kind of work." We walked past the first checkpoint where guards in Arctic gear examined my credentials with the thoroughness of people protecting something valuable. The second checkpoint required biometric scans. The third made me surrender my personal electronics and submit to a full-body search. "Seems like overkill for communications research," I said as we approached the main entrance. Barker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You'll understand soon enough." The facility's entrance looked like a bank vault crossed with a missile silo. Reinforced concrete walls disappeared into the permafrost, and I counted at least 12 armed guards for what Barker had described as a 20-person research team. My pattern recognition training kicked in automatically. Too much security, too much isolation, too much secrecy for routine work. "How deep does this place go?" I asked as we entered an elevator that required 2 key cards to operate. 40 feet down. Bedrock foundation. Barker watched the floor numbers descend. We needed stability for the equipment. The elevator opened onto a corridor that belonged in a submarine. Narrow, efficient, lined with pipes and conduits. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh white, and the air tasted recycled. My boots echoed on metal grating as we walked past laboratories filled with equipment I didn't recognize. "Bryson!" A woman's voice cut through the mechanical hum of ventilation systems. Dr. Dakota Ryan appeared from a side corridor, moving with the quick energy of someone running on caffeine and excitement. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her green eyes had an intensity that made me take a step back. "Colonel, I'll take him from here." She barely glanced at Barker before focusing on me with laser precision. "You're the pattern recognition specialist from Afghanistan, the one who cracked the Kandahar transmissions." Among other things, I looked between her and Barker, waiting for someone to explain why my classified service record was apparently common knowledge here. "We need to get him oriented first," Barker said. "Security briefings, facility protocols. He can read the manual later." Ryan was already walking away, expecting me to follow. "This can't wait." Barker's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Don't overwhelm him, Doctor. We need him functional." Ryan led me through a series of airlocks that hissed and sealed behind us with the finality of submarine doors. Each chamber required different access codes, and I noticed radiation detectors and atmospheric sensors monitoring everything that passed through. "What exactly are we protecting against?" I asked as the final airlock cycled. "Not protecting against." Ryan's hand hovered over the last door control. "Protecting everyone else from what's in here." The door opened onto a chamber that made my breath catch. 20 feet of black stone rose from the center of the room, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. The obelisk, because that's what it obviously was, absorbed the overhead lighting without reflecting any of it back, creating the illusion of a hole cut through reality. "Jesus Christ," the words came out before I could stop them. "We found it 3 months ago," Ryan said, walking around the perimeter like she was showing off a prize. "Buried in ice cores that date back 40,000 years. Untouched by human hands until our seismic sensors detected electromagnetic emissions coming from this exact location." I forced myself to look at the symbols covering its surface, but they made my eyes water. The patterns seemed familiar and completely alien at the same time, like trying to read a language I'd once known but forgotten. Electromagnetic emissions, I repeated. What kind? Structured, patterned, definitely artificial. Ryan pulled up readings on a tablet, showing waveforms that looked like encrypted burst transmissions. That's why we need you. Your brain sees patterns other people miss. The obelisk hummed, not audibly, but I felt it in my bones, a vibration that seemed to resonate with something deep in my chest. I'd felt something similar in Afghanistan when we'd intercepted particularly complex enemy communications. That sense of standing on the edge of understanding something important. How long has it been active? I asked. 6 months of low-level emissions, but 3 weeks ago the patterns changed, became more complex, more... She paused, searching for the right word. Urgent! I walked closer, studying the symbols that hurt to look at directly. My pattern recognition training kicked in automatically, cataloging shapes and relationships even as my conscious mind struggled to process what I was seeing. You think it's trying to communicate? I know it is. Ryan's voice carried absolute conviction. The question is whether we're smart enough to figure out what it's saying. The chamber felt smaller suddenly, the weight of 40 feet of concrete and ice pressing down from above. Whatever this thing was, it had been waiting under the Arctic for longer than human civilization had existed, and now it was talking. I touched the steel watch on my wrist, my father's watch, and felt the familiar comfort of its weight. But even that couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just walked into something that would change everything. So, I said, still staring at the impossible symbols, where do we start? I walked slowly around the obelisk, my boots echoing against the concrete floor. The symbols covering its surface seemed to shift in my peripheral vision, but when I looked directly at them, they stayed frozen in place, like trying to catch something moving in a dark room. 17 of these things, I said, running my hand along the edge of Ryan's workstation. All over the world. 17 that we've found. Ryan pulled up a world map on her tablet, red dots scattered across continents. Nevada, Siberia, the Sahara, Antarctica, always buried deep, always in remote locations. We've been studying them since 1952. The map showed a pattern I recognized from intelligence briefings, strategic placement, global coverage, redundancy. Someone wanted to make sure at least one would survive. That's what we think too. She swiped to another screen showing decades of documentation. Every government that found one tried the same things. Radio transmissions, electromagnetic pulses, even nuclear bombardment in the Nevada site. Nothing worked. I studied the files she scrolled through. Teams of scientists, engineers, linguists. Most projects ended with the same notation. No response detected. Recommend continued monitoring. What about the 3 sites where people died? Ryan's fingers paused on the tablet. Instantaneous neural hemorrhaging. Everyone within 100 meters, dead in seconds. No warning, no detectable energy release, just... She made a cutting gesture across her throat. The obelisk hummed again, that bone-deep vibration that made my teeth ache. I stepped back instinctively. But this one's different, I said. 6 months ago, it started transmitting on its own. Low-level electromagnetic pulses, structured patterns. That's when the Pentagon activated the Polaris project. She gestured around the chamber. Everything you see here was built in 4 months. I examined the electromagnetic readings on her monitors. The waveforms looked familiar. Burst transmissions with embedded data packets, similar to what I had intercepted from insurgent communications in Kandahar, but the mathematical precision was beyond anything human technology could produce. These patterns, I said, pointing at the screen, they're not random. Exactly. Someone's trying to talk to us. We just need to figure out how to talk back. The chamber door hissed open, and a woman entered, pushing a cart loaded with electronic equipment. She was compact and athletic, wearing navy coveralls and safety glasses pushed up on her forehead. "Phyllis Wallace," she said, extending a calloused hand. "Engineering. Bryson Henry. Communications. Good, you're here." Wallace started unloading frequency generators from her cart, each one modified with additional circuits and cooling systems. "I've been working on these for 3 weeks, modified to produce extremely low-frequency pulses at 7.83 Hz. "Schumann resonance," I said, recognizing the frequency. "Earth's natural electromagnetic heartbeat." Wallace connected cables between the generators and monitoring equipment. Dr. Ryan's theory is that these things were designed to communicate using planetary electromagnetic fields. I watched her work, noting the precision of her modifications. "You're planning to activate it." "We're planning to communicate with it," Ryan corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I looked between them. "Because activating unknown technology without understanding its purpose violates every security protocol I learned in the Signal Corps." Ryan walked to the obelisk and placed her hand against its surface. The symbols around her palm flickered, rearranging themselves into new patterns before settling back into their original configuration. "It's already responding to us," she said. "Watch." Wallace powered up one of her generators, and a low hum filled the chamber. The obelisk's surface rippled like water, symbols flowing and reforming in complex cascades. The electromagnetic readings on Ryan's monitors spiked, showing structured patterns that definitely weren't random. "It's waiting," Ryan said, her voice filled with excitement. 70 years of silence, and now it's finally ready to talk." I stared at the shifting symbols, my pattern recognition training screaming warnings I couldn't articulate. The mathematical elegance was beautiful, but beauty didn't mean safety. In Afghanistan, the most sophisticated enemy transmissions had often preceded the deadliest attacks. "What if it's not trying to communicate?" I said. "What if it's trying to activate something?" Ryan's hand was still pressed against the obelisk's surface, symbols continuing to flow around her fingers. "Then we need to understand what, before someone else figures it out first." The generators hummed louder, and the obelisk's response grew more complex. Whatever we were about to unleash, I had the sinking feeling that once we started, there would be no way to stop. The electromagnetic array hummed to life around the obelisk. Wallace's modified generators arranged in a perfect hexagon that she'd calculated would create optimal field resonance. I watched her push the equipment harder than any manufacturer would recommend, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chamber's constant chill. "Third transformer's running hot," I said, checking the readouts on her monitoring station. "I know." Wallace adjusted the frequency modulation without looking up from her controls. "But we need steady output at 7.83 Hz with perfect harmonic intervals. The math only works if we hit those exact frequencies." The first transformer blew with a sharp crack and the smell of burning electronics. Wallace cursed and swapped in a backup unit, her hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been troubleshooting equipment failures since childhood. "Maybe we should," I started. "Got it." The second backup transformer sparked and died. Wallace was already reaching for the third. "Come on, you piece of junk." Ryan paced behind us, her green eyes fixed on the obelisk's surface, where symbols had started shifting faster than before. "Whatever you're doing, it's working. Look at the response patterns." The third transformer held. Wallace's array settled into a steady rhythm, electromagnetic pulses washing over the obelisk at Earth's natural frequency. The black stone's surface rippled like water, symbols flowing in cascades that made my eyes water to follow. Then something changed. The air above the obelisk shimmered, and numbers appeared, not on any screen, but floating in space like three-dimensional projections made of light. "Holy shit," Wallace breathed. The numbers hung in the air, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23. "Prime numbers," said a voice from the chamber entrance. I turned to see a woman in her mid-30s with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone used to solving complex puzzles. "Nicole Reyes," she said, extending her hand. "Cryptography." "Bryson Henry, communications." I shook her hand while keeping one eye on the floating numbers. "You're sure those are primes?" "Absolutely, but look at the sequence." Reyes pulled out a tablet and started taking notes. "They're not in base 10. This is base 8 mathematics." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Universal mathematical concepts. Exactly. Whatever's in there understands that prime numbers are the same regardless of how you count them. It's proving it can think. Ryan moved closer to the holographic display, her face lit with excitement. We're actually communicating with it. I started documenting each transmission in my log, noting timestamps and electromagnetic readings. The pattern recognition part of my brain was working overtime, cataloging the mathematical relationships while another part screamed warnings about revealing our capabilities to unknown recipients. "We should stop here," I said. "Study these responses before we send anything else." "Are you insane?" Ryan spun around to face me. "This is first contact with non-human intelligence. We can't stop now. We don't know what we're talking to or what it wants. Basic security protocol says..." "Basic security protocol doesn't cover this situation." Ryan was already moving to the transmission controls. "Wallace, can you modulate our signal to send the Fibonacci sequence?" Wallace looked between us, her hands hovering over the controls. "I can do it, but Bryson's right about taking this slow." "Momentum is critical," Ryan said. "After 70 years of silence, we can't risk losing this opportunity because we're too cautious." I watched her input the Fibonacci sequence into the transmission array. The numbers appeared in the air above the obelisk. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. The response was immediate. New symbols flowed across the obelisk's surface, and the holographic display shifted to show atomic numbers. 1 for hydrogen, 6 for carbon, 7 for nitrogen, 8 for oxygen. "It knows our atmospheric composition," Reyes said, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "How?" I demanded. "We didn't send that information." Ryan was already programming the next transmission. "Send the atomic numbers for Earth's atmosphere: nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide." "Dr. Ryan, I strongly advise..." "Noted and overruled." She activated the transmission before I could stop her. The obelisk's response made my blood run cold. The holographic display expanded into a three-dimensional star chart showing Earth's position from multiple viewpoints across the galaxy. Constellations I recognized from different angles, stellar distances calculated with impossible precision. "It knows where we are," I said. Reyes was frantically taking notes, her tablet stylus moving across the screen in rapid strokes. "These coordinate systems are incredibly sophisticated. It's showing us Earth's position relative to galactic center, local stellar group, even accounting for orbital mechanics." "What are you translating?" I asked. "Stellar cartography. But the mathematical concepts are beyond anything we've developed. Look at these calculations for interstellar distances." Wallace's equipment started showing harmonic resonance patterns that made me nervous. Power outputs climbing on its own. The system's trying to match the obelisk's energy signature. "Can you control it?" "For now. But if this goes into uncontrolled feedback, we could lose everything." Ryan wasn't listening. She was staring at the star charts with the intensity of someone seeing their life's work validated. "It's showing us the galaxy from its perspective. This proves interstellar travel is possible." "It proves something knows where Earth is located," I corrected. "That's not necessarily good news." "Wallace, increase power output. I want maximum signal resolution." "Dr. Ryan, the harmonic resonance." "Do it." Wallace's jaw tightened, but she complied. The generators hummed louder, and the obelisk's response grew more complex. New symbols appeared faster than Reyes could translate them. "I'm seeing biological diagrams," she said. "Molecular structures, genetic sequences. It's asking about our biosphere." Every instinct I'd developed in Afghanistan was screaming warnings. "We're revealing too much. This is exactly how intelligence operations work. Start with basic information, build trust, then extract critical data." "This isn't an intelligence operation," Ryan snapped. "This is scientific discovery." "How do you know the difference?" She pulled out a sealed envelope with Barker's signature across the flap. "Because I have written authorization giving me complete scientific authority over first contact protocols." I stared at the envelope, recognizing the weight of official orders. But my training also recognized the signs of an operation spiraling beyond anyone's control. "Dr. Ryan, I'm filing a formal objection to transmitting detailed biosphere information." "Noted." She was already programming the next transmission sequence. "Wallace, prepare to send human genome data." "Human genome?" I stepped between her and the controls. "Absolutely not. It's asking for biological specifications. We need to show we understand the question. We need to understand what it plans to do with that information." Ryan's green eyes burned with fanatic intensity. "We're making history, Bryson. Don't let fear stop us from taking the next step in human evolution." I looked at the star chart still floating above the obelisk, showing Earth's position with terrifying accuracy. Whatever we were talking to had been watching us for a long time, and now we were about to tell it everything it needed to know about human biology. "This is a mistake," I said. "It's a breakthrough." Ryan activated the transmission before I could stop her. The human genome sequence flowed into space. 46 chromosomes worth of genetic information broadcast to something that already knew exactly where to find us. I opened my facility log and typed, "Formal objection filed. Dr. Ryan authorized transmission of human genetic data against security protocols. Recommend immediate halt to all communications pending threat assessment." But even as I wrote it, I knew it was too late. We'd already told them everything they needed to know. The obelisk's surface erupted into motion the moment our genome data finished transmitting. Symbols flowed like liquid mercury, reorganizing themselves into patterns that made my eyes burn to follow. But these weren't mathematical sequences anymore. These were biological diagrams, complex molecular structures that Reyes was frantically trying to decode. "DNA helixes," she called out, her stylus racing across her tablet. "Protein chains, cellular mitosis. It's showing us biological processes." Wallace's monitoring equipment started screaming warnings. Red lights flashed across her control panel as power readings climbed beyond anything we'd seen before. "Energy output spiking," she said, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chamber's chill. "We're hitting levels that shouldn't be possible." I moved toward her station, watching the numbers climb past every safety threshold. "Can you shut it down?" "That's the problem." Wallace's hands flew over her controls, but nothing responded. "The automated systems I installed to maintain signal continuity, they're preventing manual override." The obelisk began emitting a low-frequency pulse that made my teeth ache. I'd felt something similar in Afghanistan when insurgents had tried using improvised EMP devices against our communications equipment, the same bone-deep vibration that preceded electronic warfare. "This is an electromagnetic pulse weapon," I said, backing away from the obelisk. "Everyone needs to get out of here now." Ryan was still at her workstation, completely absorbed in the biological diagrams flowing across her monitors. "Look at these cellular structures. It's showing us genetic modification techniques we haven't even theorized yet. Dr. Ryan, we need to evacuate immediately." "I'm not leaving. This is the breakthrough we've been waiting for." I ran toward the emergency communication terminal to contact Barker, but the obelisk's pulse suddenly shifted frequency. A piercing 2,000 Hz tone filled the chamber, and the world tilted sideways. My knees hit the concrete floor hard. Blood ran from my nose in warm streams, and my vision blurred until the chamber became a kaleidoscope of red emergency lights and shifting shadows. The tone burrowed into my skull like a drill, scrambling my thoughts until I couldn't remember why I was trying to reach the communication panel. Through the haze, I saw Ryan collapse next to her workstation. Her hand was still reaching toward the monitors displaying the obelisk's final transmission, complex biological schematics that seemed to pulse with their own light. Wallace had fallen at her engineering station, her body convulsing as blood pooled beneath her head. My last coherent thought before everything went black was that we'd triggered something irreversible, something that had been waiting 40,000 years for exactly this moment. I woke up in the medical bay with emergency lighting painting everything the color of dried blood. My watch showed 14 hours had passed, though it felt like minutes. The splitting headache made it hard to focus, and dried blood cracked on my face when I tried to sit up. The facility was too quiet. No humming ventilation, no electronic chatter from the laboratories, just the steady pulse of emergency power and my own ragged breathing. "Hello," my voice echoed down empty corridors. "Anyone?" I stumbled through the facility, calling for survivors. The main laboratory was dark except for a few backup monitors still displaying the obelisk's final transmission. The biological diagrams had been replaced by star charts showing Earth's position with mathematical precision that made my stomach turn. I found Wallace at her engineering station, slumped over printouts of power readings. Massive cerebral hemorrhaging had killed her instantly, but her hand was still clutching data sheets that showed the obelisk had transmitted a focused beam into space for 6 hours after knocking us unconscious. 6 hours of transmission time. More than enough to send detailed information across interstellar distances. The printout showed energy levels that should have been impossible. Wallace's equipment had somehow channeled power directly from the facility's reactor, bypassing every safety system she'd installed. The beam had been focused with surgical precision toward a specific point in space, coordinates that matched the star chart still glowing on Ryan's monitors. I checked the other laboratories, finding them empty but undisturbed. No signs of struggle, no indication that anyone else had survived the electromagnetic pulse. The facility's communication systems were completely dead, their circuits fried by the same energy surge that had killed Wallace. In the main chamber, the obelisk stood silent and dark. Its surface had returned to the featureless black stone we'd first discovered, showing no trace of the symbols that had covered it during our communication attempts. But the air around it still hummed with residual energy, and my watch's electromagnetic sensors detected low-level radiation that hadn't been there before. I found my facility log where I'd dropped it and made a new entry. Day 1 post-activation. Wallace confirmed dead from cerebral hemorrhaging. Ryan and Reyes missing, presumed dead. Obelisk transmitted focused beam for 6 hours following genome data transmission. All communication systems non-functional. Recommend immediate evacuation and containment protocols. But even as I wrote it, I knew no one would read it. The facility's isolation that had seemed like a security advantage now felt like a tomb. We were 40 feet underground in the middle of the Arctic, with no way to contact the outside world and no way to warn anyone about what we'd unleashed. I walked back to the obelisk chamber and stared at the silent black stone. Whatever we'd awakened, it had gotten everything it needed from us. The genome data, the stellar coordinates, 6 hours of uninterrupted transmission time to send that information wherever it needed to go. My father's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, marking time that suddenly felt very precious. Because if my pattern recognition training was right, we hadn't just made contact with alien intelligence, we'd just told them dinner was ready. I found Reyes slumped over her workstation, blood pooled beneath her chair like spilled ink. Her fingers were still resting on the keyboard, spelling out half-finished words that made my stomach clench. Cultivation. Harvest. Genetic modification. The sight hit me harder than finding Wallace. Maybe because Reyes had been trying to warn us even as she died. "Ryan?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty chamber. I found her sitting against the chamber door, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. Her green eyes were red-rimmed and unfocused, like she'd been crying for hours. "Ryan." I shook her shoulders gently. "Are you hurt?" She looked up at me and broke. Completely fell apart, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "I killed them," she gasped between tears. "I killed everyone. You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen because I wanted..." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "I wanted history to remember me as the person who made first contact." I helped her to her feet, noting how she trembled. "What happened after I blacked out?" "The obelisk kept transmitting for 6 hours. Wallace tried to shut it down, but the feedback killed her instantly. Reyes lasted longer." Ryan's voice cracked. "She kept working even as the hemorrhaging started. Said someone had to decode the final message." My throat went dry. "What message?" Ryan led me back to Reyes's workstation, stepping carefully around the blood. The monitors were still active, showing translation algorithms and partially decoded symbol sequences. But it was the audio file icon blinking on the screen that made my hands shake. "She recorded this while she was dying," Ryan said, clicking play. Reyes's voice came through the speakers, weak but clear. "Bryson, if you're hearing this, then the activation worked exactly as designed. The symbols aren't communication, they're confirmation protocols. Humanity isn't naturally evolved. We're a cultivated crop." I gripped the edge of the desk. "What?" The recording continued. "The genetic modifications go back 40,000 years. Inserted DNA sequences designed to develop intelligence, emotional complexity, specific neural pathways. We were seeded by beings who've done this before, on other worlds. The obelisk was waiting for us to reach optimal specifications." Ryan was crying again, quiet tears that she didn't bother wiping away. "The genome data we transmitted," Reyes's dying voice explained, "confirmed we meet all biological requirements for collection. 46 chromosomes, specific protein markers, neural development within acceptable parameters. We triggered automated harvest protocols that have been dormant since the obelisks were placed." I stared at the translation on her screen. Symbols that had looked like mathematical beauty now revealed themselves as something far more sinister. Genetic specifications, cultivation timelines, harvest readiness indicators. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "We're livestock. The signal we sent can't be stopped or blocked," the recording continued. "Based on response timing and stellar coordinates, I calculate 72 days until arrival. The collectors are coming." The audio file ended with the sound of Reyes collapsing onto her keyboard. I stood there in the silence, trying to process what I'd just heard. 40,000 years of human development, all according to someone else's plan. Every achievement, every breakthrough, every moment of progress, all designed to bring us to this exact point where we'd be smart enough to activate our own execution. "Wallace figured out the math before she died," Ryan said, pulling up another workstation. "Look at these calculations." The screen showed stellar mechanics, signal propagation speeds, electromagnetic transmission analysis. Wallace's final work, completed even as the obelisk's pulse was killing her. 72 days, I read from her notes. Based on the response delay and the star charts they showed us, that's how long it takes them to get here once the harvest beacon activates. Ryan nodded miserably. 7 billion humans, finally ripened to specifications, and I'm the one who told them dinner was ready. I looked around the chamber at the evidence of our catastrophic mistake. Wallace dead at her engineering station. Reyes collapsed over her translations. The obelisk standing silent and dark, its job complete. "The other sites," I said. "If this one activated..." "All 17 are transmitting now. I checked the satellite feeds before the communication systems died." Ryan pulled up her tablet, showing global electromagnetic readings. Every obelisk on Earth is sending the same signal. They're all synchronized. The pattern was unmistakable. 17 harvest beacons, all triggered by our activation, all broadcasting humanity's readiness for collection. We hadn't just doomed ourselves, we doomed the entire species. I touched my father's watch, feeling its steady tick against my wrist. 72 days. That's all the time humanity had left before the collectors arrived to claim their crop. "What do we do now?" Ryan asked. I stared at the obelisk, thinking about the choice ahead of us. We could try to cover this up, maintain the lie, let humanity live its final days in ignorance. Or we could tell the truth and watch civilization tear itself apart in panic. Either way, the harvest was coming. The only question was whether people deserved to know what was heading their way. I stared at the emergency access panel, Barker's codes burning in my memory like a brand. Ryan had given them to me along with her confession, and now they felt like keys to a door I wasn't sure I wanted to open. "You don't have to do this," Ryan said from where she sat slumped against the wall. Her voice was hollow, drained of the manic energy that had driven her to activate the obelisk. Sometimes ignorance really is mercy. I punched in the first sequence of numbers. The panel beeped and requested secondary authorization. "I need to know how deep this goes." The classified database opened like a flower blooming in reverse, revealing layer after layer of buried secrets. The first file made my hands shake. Project Seedling, Nevada Site Discovery, July 15, 1952. Grainy black and white photographs showed an obelisk identical to ours being excavated from a nuclear test site. Scientists in radiation suits stood around it with instruments that looked primitive compared to what we'd been using. The same symbols covered its surface, the same impossible geometry that hurt to look at directly. 68 years, I whispered. They've known for 68 years. I scrolled through decades of documentation, site after site, discovery after discovery. The Siberian obelisk found during a mining operation in 1967. The Antarctic site uncovered by a research expedition in 1974. Each one carefully hidden, studied in secret, filed away under classifications that would keep them buried for generations. "Look at this." I pulled up a file labeled Activation Attempts, Historical Summary. Ryan leaned over my shoulder, reading the clinical descriptions of failed experiments. Radio transmissions, electromagnetic bombardment, even attempts to physically damage the obelisks with explosives and nuclear weapons. Nothing had worked. The stones remained inert, unresponsive, waiting. Until now. "They tried everything except what we did," Ryan said. "Structured communication using planetary frequencies." I found the psychological profiles next. Teams of scientists, engineers, linguists, all carefully selected for specific traits. High intelligence but limited imagination, technical expertise without philosophical curiosity, people who would follow protocols without asking dangerous questions about consequences. Then I found my own file. Personnel assessment, Henry Bryson James, recommended for Project Polaris activation team. My throat went dry as I read Barker's evaluation of my psychological profile. Every strength I thought I possessed, every skill I'd developed through years of training and experience, all of it cataloged and weaponized against me. Subject demonstrates exceptional pattern recognition abilities combined with deep-seated respect for authority figures. Military conditioning has reinforced natural tendency to follow orders despite personal reservations. Recommend for primary activation role due to high probability of task completion regardless of emerging safety concerns. The words hit me like physical blows. Barker hadn't recruited me despite my tendency to question orders. He'd recruited me because of it. Because he knew I'd voice concerns but follow through anyway. Because my loyalty to authority was stronger than my survival instincts. Jesus Christ, I breathed. I was the perfect tool. Ryan was reading over my shoulder, her face pale. "Bryson, you couldn't have known. Look at this." I pulled up another section of my file. psychological manipulation protocols, specific techniques for maintaining subject compliance during activation sequence. The clinical language made my skin crawl. Instructions for appealing to my sense of duty, my need for approval from authority figures, my fear of being seen as incompetent by educated colleagues. Every conversation with Barker had been carefully scripted to push my psychological buttons. I found recordings next. Audio files of Barker's meetings with Pentagon officials, discussing contingency plans for what they euphemistically called activation scenarios. If the obelisks respond to communication attempts, Barker's voice said through the speakers, we'll need immediate containment protocols, elimination of witnesses, destruction of evidence, prepared cover stories for media consumption. Another voice, older and more gravelly, what about the activation team? Expendable. We'll blame equipment failure or foreign sabotage. The important thing is preventing global panic while we assess the response. I sat back in my chair, the full scope of the betrayal washing over me. Not just my betrayal, humanity's betrayal. 70 years of lies, cover-ups, and manipulation. 70 years of preparing for this moment while keeping the entire species in the dark about what was coming. Pull up the satellite feeds, I told Ryan. She accessed the global monitoring network with shaking fingers. The display showed all 17 obelisk sites around the world, each one now glowing with the same pulsing energy we'd triggered here. Synchronized beacons broadcasting humanity's readiness for harvest. Military forces are already moving, Ryan said, pointing to heat signatures converging on each site. Look at the troop deployments. I watched convoys of vehicles racing toward obelisk locations across 6 continents, not rescue teams, containment teams. Armed forces with orders to secure the sites and eliminate anyone who might talk about what they'd seen. They're going to kill everyone, I said. Standard protocol for containment breaches. Ryan pulled up another file showing prepared disinformation campaigns. Equipment malfunction at remote research facility. Tragic accident claims lives of dedicated scientists. Foreign terrorist attack on classified installation. The lies were already written, ready to be deployed the moment Barker's extraction team arrived. My death would be explained away as heroic sacrifice in service to national security. Wallace and Reyes would become footnotes in a classified report that would never see daylight. I found my psychological evaluation again, reading the sections that detailed my specific vulnerabilities, my need for validation from authority figures, my fear of being seen as unintelligent by educated colleagues, my tendency to complete missions even when personal judgment suggested otherwise. He played me perfectly, I said. Every doubt I voiced, every concern I raised, he knew exactly how to respond to keep me moving forward. Ryan was crying again, quiet tears that she didn't bother wiping away. We're both responsible. I wanted the discovery so badly that I ignored every warning sign. You wanted to serve your country so badly that you followed orders even when they felt wrong. I stared at the satellite feeds showing military forces converging on obelisk sites. In a few hours, every witness would be dead and the cover-up would begin. Humanity would never know what had really happened here. They'd die in 72 days without understanding why. There's something else, Ryan said, pulling up a final file. Barker's personal notes on the activation timeline. I read the document with growing horror. Barker had known the obelisks would activate eventually. The electromagnetic emissions we'd detected weren't random. They were countdown signals indicating that humanity had reached optimal development for harvest. Our communication attempts hadn't triggered the activation. They'd simply confirmed that we were ready. We were always going to activate it, I said. If not us, then the next team, or the one after that. The harvesters were just waiting for us to prove we'd reached the right level of technological development. Smart enough to activate their beacon, but not smart enough to understand what it meant. I closed the files and sat in the silence of the empty facility. Around us, the evidence of humanity's greatest mistake lay scattered across workstations and monitors. The truth about our origins, our purpose, our approaching extinction, all of it hidden behind classifications and lies. My father's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, marking time that suddenly felt infinitely precious. 72 days until the collectors arrived. 72 days for humanity to live or die in ignorance, depending on what I did next. The communication console blinked with an incoming transmission. Barker's voice crackled through the speakers. "Station Polaris, this is Extraction Team Leader, ETA 6 hours. Maintain containment protocols until arrival." I looked at Ryan, then at the console that could broadcast to the entire world. The choice was simple and terrible. Follow my training and protect the lie, or break every oath I'd ever taken and tell the truth. Either way, humanity had 72 days left. The only question was whether they deserved to know what was coming for them. I stared at the sealed envelope in my hands, Barker's signature across the flap like a death warrant. The paper felt heavier than it should have, weighted with the authority of orders I'd been trained never to question. "Open it," Ryan said from where she knelt beside the obelisk. Her voice was steady now, the hysteria burned away by exhaustion and acceptance. "You need to see what he's asking you to do." I broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of military letterhead. The words hit me like physical blows. Classified execution order, Project Polaris. Authorization, Colonel Jasper Barker. Operative, Sergeant Bryson Henry. Eliminate all surviving personnel. Destroy all evidence of obelisk activation. Maintain cover story. Equipment malfunction during routine communications research. Extraction Team ETA 0600 hours. Compliance ensures promotion to Staff Sergeant and assignment to Pentagon Intelligence Division. My hands shook as I read the clinical language describing how to stage the deaths, which equipment to destroy, which files to delete. Everything planned out with military precision, including my reward for following orders. "He knew," I said. "He knew this would happen, and he planned for it." Ryan nodded without looking up from the obelisk's pulsing surface. 70 years of contingency planning, every possible outcome mapped and prepared for. I found the sidearm where Barker had left it in the emergency safe, a standard-issue Beretta with 2 magazines. The weight felt familiar in my hands, muscle memory from countless training exercises. Point, aim, squeeze, simple mechanical actions that would solve Barker's problem and secure my future. "You should do it," Ryan said quietly. "Follow the orders. Let humanity die in peace." The obelisk's surface rippled with new symbols, and Reyes's translation program activated automatically. Text scrolled across her monitor in real time, decoding the harvester's final confirmation. Cultivation cycle complete. Species development, optimal. Neural complexity, within parameters. Emotional capacity, sufficient. Technological threshold, achieved. Harvest authorization, confirmed. I watched the translation with growing horror. 40,000 years of human development reduced to quality control metrics. Every breakthrough, every achievement, every moment of progress, all measured against harvester specifications for optimal crop yield. "Look at this," I said, pointing at the screen. "They're showing us the cultivation timeline." The obelisk projected new holographic displays above its surface. Images of early humans receiving genetic modifications, prehistoric civilizations guided toward specific technological developments, historical events nudged to ensure optimal population growth and neural evolution. The mathematical precision was identical to what I'd seen in Afghanistan. Target acquisition protocols, confirmation of objectives, authorization for extraction. Except now the target was Earth, and the objective was 7 billion human beings. "It's the same pattern," I said. "Exactly the same as insurgent communications before drone strikes. Identify target, confirm specifications, authorize elimination." Ryan was crying again, but her voice stayed steady. "Humanity deserves better than knowing their livestock, Parents should be able to tuck their children into bed tonight with hope instead of explaining that monsters are coming to harvest them. I gripped the pistol tighter, feeling its familiar weight. 2 bullets would solve everything. Ryan first, then myself. Barker's extraction team would find the scene exactly as ordered. Equipment malfunction, tragic accident, no survivors to complicate the cover story. Think about what happens if you don't follow orders, Ryan continued. Global panic, economic collapse, wars over resources, billions dead from riots and chaos before the collectors even arrive. Is that mercy? The obelisk pulsed brighter and new symbols flowed across its surface. Reyes's program translated them automatically. Harvest fleet deployment. Initiated. Estimated arrival. 72 Earth rotations. Collection efficiency. 99.7%. Specimen preservation. Optimal. I stared at the clinical language describing humanity's extinction. Collection efficiency. Specimen preservation. We weren't people to them. We were inventory being prepared for transport. They've done this before, I said, reading the data streams. Other worlds, other species. We're just the latest crop in a cycle that's been running for millions of years. Ryan nodded miserably. And now we've confirmed we're ready for harvest. Smart enough to activate their beacon, but not smart enough to understand what it meant. I walked to the communication console, the pistol heavy in my hand. The transmission equipment was still functional, still connected to satellite networks that could reach every corner of the globe. One broadcast would tell the world everything: the obelisks, the cultivation, the approaching harvest. The truth that would shatter every assumption humanity had about its place in the universe. Don't, Ryan said. Please, let them die in ignorance. Let children believe in tomorrow. Let parents think their love matters. Give them that mercy. I thought about my father, working in the mines until black lung killed him, believing his sacrifice meant something. About the soldiers I'd served with in Afghanistan, dying for causes they thought were righteous. About every person who'd ever lived and loved and hoped, never knowing they were part of someone else's agricultural project. What if they deserved to know, I said. What if facing the truth with courage is better than dying in a lie? What if it isn't? Ryan's voice cracked. What if the truth just makes their final days hell? The obelisk displayed new images, harvest ships moving between star systems, collecting mature civilizations like farmers gathering wheat, billions of beings loaded into transport vessels, their worlds left empty and silent. The mathematical efficiency was beautiful and terrifying. I raised the pistol, feeling the weight of choice in my hands. Follow orders and protect the lie, or break my oath and reveal the truth. Either way, humanity had 72 days left. The only question was whether they'd face their end with knowledge or ignorance. My father's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, marking time that suddenly felt infinitely precious. In 6 hours, Barker's team would arrive, expecting to find bodies and silence. What they found instead would depend on what I did in the next few minutes. I'm sorry, I said to Ryan, but I wasn't sure yet whether I was apologizing for following orders or breaking them. I set the pistol down on the console and walked to the quantum encryption array that connected our facility to Barker's command network. The military-grade equipment hummed with the kind of processing power that could crack enemy codes or, in this case, receive remote termination commands. "What are you doing?" Ryan asked from where she sat, slumped against the obelisk. I pulled the first circuit board free, watching sparks cascade from severed connections. Buying time. The encryption array was built like a tank. Redundant systems, hardened components designed to survive electromagnetic pulses and physical attacks. But I'd spent 3 years maintaining similar equipment in Afghanistan, and I knew exactly which components would cripple the whole system. The main processing unit came apart in my hands, revealing the quantum cores that handled Barker's encrypted communications. I yanked them free one by one, feeling the satisfying crunch of expensive technology being reduced to scrap metal. He can't trigger the self-destruct remotely now, I said, tossing the cores into a pile of broken electronics. Whatever happens next, it'll be my choice. Ryan watched me work with hollow eyes. You're just delaying the inevitable. His extraction team will be here in 6 hours. I moved to the data storage systems next, uploading everything to an encrypted server I'd set up during my first week here. Reyes's translations, Wallace's calculations, Ryan's confession, my own logs documenting every step of our catastrophic mistake. The complete record of humanity's final 72 days. What if they deserve to know? I said, watching the upload progress bar crawl toward completion. What if they don't? Ryan's voice cracked. What if the truth just makes everything worse? I thought about my father, dying of black lung disease in a hospital bed, still believing his work in the mines had meant something. About the soldiers I'd served with who died thinking they were protecting freedom. About every person who'd ever lived and loved and hoped without knowing they were part of someone else's agricultural project. The upload finished with a soft chime. 47 gigabytes of data now stored on servers across 3 continents, ready to be transmitted to every news outlet, government agency, and scientific institution on Earth. I sat down at the transmission console and stared at the controls. Wide-spectrum broadcast capability, military and civilian emergency frequencies, satellite uplinks that could reach every corner of the globe. One button press would tell the world everything. Please, Ryan whispered, don't do this to them. My hands hovered over the keyboard. The obelisk pulsed behind us, its surface still displaying the harvester's confirmation protocols. Collection efficiency, 99.7%. Specimen preservation, optimal. Clinical language describing the extinction of everything I'd ever known or cared about. I started typing. To all receiving stations. Priority alpha transmission. Classification, declassified by emergency authority. Source, Station Polaris, Arctic Research Facility. This is Sergeant Bryson Henry, United States Army Signal Corps. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you believe about humanity's place in the universe. My fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical precision, muscle memory from years of military communications training. Each word felt like a betrayal of everything I'd been taught about duty and following orders. We are not alone. We never have been. For 40,000 years, humanity has been cultivated by beings who view us as livestock, ready for harvest. Stop, Ryan sobbed. Please stop. I kept typing, uploading the data files as attachments. Reyes's translation showing the obelisk's true purpose. Wallace's calculations proving the harvest fleet was already en route. Ryan's confession about triggering the activation sequence. 17 obelisks placed strategically around Earth have been broadcasting our readiness for collection. Based on electromagnetic analysis, we have 72 days before the harvesters arrive. The transmission console showed green lights across all frequency bands, military emergency channels, civilian broadcast networks, internet backbone connections. My message was propagating through every communication system on the planet. You're destroying everything, Ryan screamed. Civilization will collapse. Billions will die in panic before the collectors even arrive. I looked at her tear-streaked face, then at the obelisk still pulsing with alien mathematics. Maybe people deserve the chance to say goodbye properly, to make their own choices about how to spend their final days. The console chimed as my transmission reached the first relay stations. Within minutes, it would be bouncing off satellites and fiber optic cables, spreading across the globe faster than any government could stop it. Barker's voice crackled through the emergency channels. Station Polaris, abort transmission immediately. You are in violation of the Espionage Act and will face court-martial for treason. I keyed the microphone. Message received and understood, Colonel, but I'm not following that order. Sergeant Henry, you are endangering national security and global stability. cease all communications and await extraction. National security? I laughed, the sound bitter in the empty chamber. You've been lying to the entire species for 70 years. You recruited me specifically because you knew I'd follow orders even when they felt wrong. Well, congratulations, sir. You finally found the order I won't follow. Static filled the channel as Barker tried to override my transmission, but the quantum encryption array was scattered across the floor in pieces. He had no way to stop what I'd started. The obelisk's surface erupted with new symbols, and Reyes's translation program activated automatically. Text scrolled across the monitor in real time. Human communication detected species awareness, confirmed harvest timeline, unchanged collection, efficiency, unaffected. I stared at the clinical assessment. Even knowing the truth wouldn't save us. The harvesters had factored in the possibility that their crops might become aware of their fate. It changed nothing about the mathematics of extinction, but it changed everything about how we'd face it. My transmission console lit up with incoming responses, news networks demanding confirmation, government agencies issuing denials, scientists requesting access to the data files, the cascade of disclosure spreading faster than anyone could contain it. "Look what you've done," Ryan whispered, watching the flood of communications. "The world's about to tear itself apart." I thought about the choice I'd made, weighing duty against conscience, institutional loyalty against human truth. Maybe, but at least they'll know why. The obelisk pulsed brighter, displaying new holographic images above its surface. Harvest ships moving between star systems, collecting mature civilizations like farmers gathering wheat. The mathematical precision was beautiful and terrifying, but now it wouldn't be a surprise. My father's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, marking time that had suddenly become infinitely precious. 72 days for humanity to process the truth, to make peace with their fate, to choose how they wanted to spend their final moments as a free species. I'd given them that choice. Whether they used it wisely or tore themselves apart in panic wasn't my responsibility anymore. The transmission console showed my message had reached every major communication hub on Earth. There was no stopping it now, no containing the truth that would shatter every assumption humanity had about its place in the universe. I was no longer a dutiful soldier following orders. I was humanity's truth teller, and I'd chosen conscience over duty. The consequences would be mine to face. The news feeds painted a picture of a world coming apart at the seams. I sat in the facility's communication center, watching humanity process the truth I'd forced upon them through dozens of satellite channels and internet streams. In New York, crowds gathered in Times Square holding signs that read 72 days left, and we are not livestock. The police had given up trying to disperse them. What was the point of maintaining order when order itself was about to end? In London, Parliament had called an emergency session that devolved into shouting matches about government cover-ups and decades of lies. The Prime Minister's resignation speech lasted 3 minutes before he walked off the podium without taking questions. But it was the smaller moments that hit hardest. A father in Tokyo teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. An elderly couple in Kansas sitting on their porch swing, holding hands and watching the sunset like it was the first one they'd ever seen. A group of teenagers in Sao Paulo spray painting "Truth over Lies" on a government building while police officers stood by and watched. "They're not all panicking," I said to Ryan, who was slumped in a chair beside me. "Look at this." I switched to a feed from Mumbai showing thousands of people gathered in peaceful prayer, their voices rising in harmony despite speaking different languages. The camera panned across faces that showed fear, yes, but also something else. Relief, maybe, or acceptance. "Some of them are grateful," I continued. "They're saying goodbye properly instead of being blindsided." Ryan didn't respond. She'd been silent for the past hour, staring at the medical supplies she'd retrieved from the facility's emergency kit. The morphine vials sat on the table between us like small glass accusations. "I can't live with this," she finally said. Her voice was steady, matter of fact. I can't be remembered as the scientist whose ambition triggered humanity's extinction. I turned away from the news feeds to look at her properly. Her green eyes had lost their manic intensity, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. Ryan, you didn't know. I knew enough. She picked up one of the morphine vials, turning it over in her hands. You tried to warn me. Wallace tried to warn me. Even Reyes tried to slow me down. But I wanted the discovery so badly that I ignored every safety protocol. On the screens behind us, the feeds showed more reactions. Scientists in Geneva demanding access to obelisk sites. Military forces in Nevada establishing perimeters around the activation zone. Ordinary people making extraordinary choices about how to spend their remaining time. The world needed to know, I said. Even if it hurts, even if it causes chaos, people deserve the truth. Ryan loaded the morphine into a syringe with practiced efficiency. Her hands didn't shake. I'm including a message in your final transmission about the dangers of unchecked ambition, about what happens when scientists prioritize discovery over safety. I watched her prepare the injection, understanding what she was planning, but unable to find words to stop her. Maybe because part of me understood her choice. The weight of being responsible for 7 billion deaths. How do you carry that? Don't do this alone, I said finally. She looked up at me, surprised. You want to? No, but I'll stay with you. If this is what you need to do, you shouldn't have to do it alone. Ryan's composure cracked for just a moment. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she wiped them away and nodded. Thank you. She found a vein on the first try, the morphine flowing into her bloodstream with clinical precision. I held her hand as the drug took effect, watching her breathing slow and her face relax. Tell them, she whispered, her words already slurring. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them science without conscience is just... She never finished the sentence. Her breathing stopped 3 minutes later, her hand still warm in mine. I sat with her body for a long time, watching the news feeds show a world grappling with its mortality. Some cities burned, while others bloomed with spontaneous acts of kindness. Some people hoarded resources, while others gave everything away. Humanity was showing its full spectrum in these final days, the beautiful and the ugly, the noble and the desperate. My communication console chimed with an incoming encrypted message, then another, then dozens more, all from other obelisk sites around the world. I opened the first one. Site 7, Siberia. Activation confirmed. 3 dead, 1 survivor. Military containment failed. Local population informed. Requesting coordination for global response. The second. Site 12, Antarctica. Full team casualties except myself. Obelisk transmitting continuously. Chilean government demanding answers. Cannot maintain cover story. The third. Site 3, Nevada. Activation successful. All personnel eliminated except security team. Pentagon ordered immediate burial of site. Refusing orders. Truth must be preserved. One by one, the other sites were breaking their silence. Surviving personnel choosing truth over institutional loyalty, creating a cascade of disclosure that no government could stop. The pattern was identical everywhere. Activation, casualties, cover-up attempts, and finally, conscience winning over duty. I started compiling their reports into a comprehensive document, the complete record of humanity's final 72 days, told by the people who'd triggered the countdown, our mistakes, our choices, our last act of defiance against beings who saw us as livestock. The obelisk behind me pulsed with new symbols, and Reyes's translation program activated automatically. Human awareness, confirmed emotional response, within parameters, species behavior, predictable harvest timeline, unchanged. I stared at the clinical assessment. Even our rebellion was anticipated, factored into their calculations. The harvesters had seen this before on other worlds, crops becoming aware of their fate, some panicking, some accepting, some fighting back. It changed nothing about the mathematics of extinction, but it changed everything about how we'd face it. I began recording my final transmission, standing before the obelisk that had doomed us all. The camera captured both my face and the alien symbols flowing across its surface. Humanity and its executioner in the same frame. This is Sergeant Bryson Henry, final transmission from Station Polaris. By now you know the truth about our situation. 40,000 years of cultivation, 72 days until harvest. I want to explain how we got here and what it means for our final days. I detailed everything. My recruitment by Barker, the psychological manipulation, the decades of government lies, Ryan's ambition, and the activation sequence that triggered our doom. The pattern of similar activations at sites worldwide, all confirming the same terrible truth. We made mistakes, I continued. I followed orders when I should have trusted my instincts. Dr. Ryan prioritized discovery over safety. The military chose institutional control over human truth. But our greatest mistake was believing we were alone in the universe. The obelisk pulsed brighter, displaying new holographic images of harvest ships moving between star systems. I turned the camera toward them, showing the mathematical precision of extinction. The beings coming for us don't see us as people. We're inventory to them, crops ready for collection. They've done this before on countless worlds, and they'll do it again after Earth is empty. But they didn't plan for one thing: our ability to choose how we face the end. I thought about the news feeds showing humanity's response, the riots and the prayers, the despair and the defiance, people making peace with loved ones, completing unfinished dreams, saying goodbye properly instead of being blindsided. Some of you will spend these 72 days in fear. Others will find peace. Some will try to fight what's coming. Others will accept it with grace. All of those choices are valid. The harvesters gave us intelligence and emotion as part of their cultivation process, but they can't control how we use those gifts in our final days. The facility's emergency beacon activated with a sharp electronic wail. Barker's extraction team was close now, probably less than an hour out. I could hear helicopters in the distance, their rotors cutting through Arctic wind. I'm about to face military justice for treason, I said to the camera, for choosing human truth over institutional loyalty. I don't regret that choice. 72 days of honest fear is better than 72 days of false hope. I uploaded the complete data package, every file, every recording, every piece of evidence about humanity's true situation. The transmission propagated through satellite networks faster than any government could stop it, spreading the final truth to every corner of the globe. The helicopters were landing now. I could hear boots on metal grating, voices shouting orders, the mechanical precision of a military operation designed to contain and control. But it was too late for containment. The truth was out, spreading through every communication network on Earth. Humanity would face its end with full knowledge of what they truly were, not the crown of creation, but a carefully cultivated crop ready for harvest. I stood before the obelisk as Barker's team breached the facility, watching alien symbols flow across its surface like water. The mathematics of extinction, beautiful and terrible in their precision. My father's watch ticked steadily on my wrist, marking time that had suddenly become infinitely precious. 72 days for humanity to choose how to face the truth. I'd given them that choice. The consequences would be mine to face.